My name is Myra Kessler, and I am 33 years old. On Mother's Day, in front of 600 guests at my mother-in-law's charity gala, my husband struck me across the face. The sound carried through the speakers. Every chandelier in that ballroom caught the silence that followed. Then Judith Kessler, my mother-in-law, raised her champagne glass, and 600 people laughed. I stood there with blood on my lip, thinking one thing. None of you know who my mother is. 48 hours later, Grant Kessler would be standing before a judge. Judith Kessler would lose the foundation she had spent 21 years building. And I would be sitting at my mother's table, eating her stuffed cabbage rolls in a kitchen where nobody controlled the guest list. But let me go back, because what happened that night did not begin at the gala. It started 3 years earlier, on the day I married into the Kessler family. Welcome back to Revenge Narrative Stories, the channel where women do not yell, they act. If you have ever been told you are not good enough for someone's family, this one is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I grew up in a studio apartment in Akron, Ohio. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, 1 mother who worked 3 jobs, so I could have 1 future. My mother's name is Elena Novak. She came to this country from Romania at 23 with $400 and a phrase book. She worked as a court interpreter during the day. At night, she studied for the bar exam at a library table 2 bus rides from our apartment. She passed on her second attempt. She was 31. Elena had 1 rule in our home. She repeated it so often I can still hear her accent. No crying without a plan. Tears are data. They tell you something is wrong, then you fix it. I did not fully understand what she meant until much later. I graduated from Ohio State on a full scholarship, $48,000 a year that I never had to borrow. Summa cum laude, health administration. My first position paid $52,000 a year at a regional hospital system in Columbus. I worked in compliance, the department that reviews financial records, flags irregularities, and ensures the numbers align with the paperwork. My mother worked within the court system for 20 years before she retired. She rarely spoke about the details. She simply said, "I helped people find the truth when they could not find it themselves." I believe the hardest chapter of my life was behind me. I had the degree. I had the career. I had the apartment with my name on the lease and nobody else's. Then I met Grant Kessler at a hospital fundraiser, and everything I thought I understood about hardship began again. Grant was charming in the way that catches you completely off guard. He never tried too hard. He asked real questions, genuine ones. He remembered what I had mentioned about my work 2 weeks after our first conversation and brought it up again as though it truly mattered. 6 months of dating. Sunday morning coffee. Tuesday evening calls that stretched past midnight. He proposed in October on a park bench in German Village with a ring that cost more than my car. The first red flag arrived wrapped inside a joke. "Mom needs to approve the ring first," he said, smiling. I laughed. He did not laugh back. Judith Kessler inserted herself into the wedding planning within 72 hours of the engagement. She selected the venue, Briarwood Country Club, where she was a founding member. She dictated the guest list. She revised the menu twice. I wanted my mother's sarmale, Romanian stuffed cabbage rolls, on the appetizer table. Judith said it would confuse the caterers. I let it go, all of it, because I believe compromise was the price of joining a family. I thought that if I remained patient enough, gracious enough, flexible enough, she would eventually welcome me as one of her own. On our wedding day, my mother placed a silk handkerchief in my hand. White linen, hand-stitched, with her name, Elena, embroidered in pale blue thread along the corner. She pressed it into my palm and said, "Wipe your tears, then make your plan." I tucked it into my clutch. I thought she was speaking of happy tears. I did not yet understand. Harold Kessler died 21 years before I married his son. Heart attack at 54. He left behind a trust fund worth $2.8 million, a building materials company, and a wife who had spent 30 years as a homemaker. Judith became the sole trustee of everything. The trust covered Grant's education, his first car, his down payment, and his monthly supplement. That is what Judith called it, a supplement. $3,000 a month wired into Grant's account, on top of his salary from the family company. Paige, Grant's younger sister, received the same. Both of them had to seek Judith's approval for anything beyond the supplement. A new roof? Asked Judith. A vacation? Asked Judith. A charitable donation over $500? Asked Judith. She called it stewardship. I am protecting what Harold built. She told anyone who questioned it. And nobody asked twice, because the answer always arrived with a look that closed the conversation. I learned later, much later, that Judith had not always been this way. When she married Harold, his mother had treated her exactly as she now treated me. Harold's mother called Judith the girl from the wrong side of the river. Judith survived that woman by becoming her. She constructed a fortress of control around the family's wealth and locked the door from the inside. Grant's sister Paige was 30. She worked as an event coordinator for Judith's charitable foundation and lived in a townhouse Judith had purchased. Paige had once introduced her college friend Lauren to Grant. Years earlier, Grant chose me instead. Paige never stated it directly, but I felt it in every room we occupied together. The first Thanksgiving at the Kessler house revealed everything I needed to know. I brought my mother's sarmal, 12 rolls wrapped tightly in pickled cabbage, simmered for 4 hours using Elena's recipe. I carried them in a glass dish covered with tin foil and placed them on the dining table beside the cranberry sauce and the roasted turkey. Judith looked at the dish. She lifted the foil. She set it back down. Then she turned to the table, to Grant, Paige, Cousin Rachel, and Uncle Don, and spoke 5 words. "She is not one of us." She said it the way you would say, "Pass the salt." No anger, no volume. Just a fact, delivered like a weather report. Paige laughed. Grant stared at his plate. Uncle Don coughed. Rachel looked at me with an expression I could not decipher. Judith turned to Paige. "Get the real food from the kitchen, honey." I picked up the dish. I carried it to the kitchen. I covered it with foil, walked to my car, and sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes. The engine was off. The windows were up. November air pressed against the glass. I did not cry. I thought about what my mother would say. Tears are data. I had the data. Judith Kessler did not see me as family. She saw me as a visitor who had overstayed. That night, back in our apartment, I opened my laptop. I created a folder on the desktop. I named it insurance. I did not yet know what I would be saving inside it. I only knew that a woman who says she is not one of us at Thanksgiving will say far worse when she believes nobody is keeping count. Year 2 began with a house. Grant wanted to buy one. He had found a 4-bedroom colonial in Westlake, 20 minutes from his office, with a yard and a 2-car garage. The listing price was $410,000. Grant's plan was straightforward. Ask Judith to release funds from the trust for the down payment. I suggested something different. We have $85,000 in savings between us. We could put 20% down on something smaller, something that belongs to us alone. Grant looked at me as though I had proposed we move into a tent. Mom will think I am rejecting her. You are buying a house, Grant, with your wife. That is not rejection. He called Judith that same evening. By morning, she had already contacted a realtor. She selected the neighborhood. She negotiated the mortgage terms. She co-signed the loan, which placed her name directly on the deed. I opened a separate savings account the following Monday. I began maximizing my 401k contributions. I reached out to 3 compliance directors at other hospital systems and started building a professional network that carried no connection to the Kessler name. There was one night that year that nearly changed everything. Grant called me at 2 in the morning. He had been dreaming about his father. His voice was cracked open in a way I had never heard before. "Dad would have liked you, Myra. He was not like Mom. He was quiet. He listened." I held him until he fell asleep. His breathing steadied against my shoulder, and for a moment, I saw the man he could have become without 21 years of Judith whispering in his ear. By 7 the next morning, Judith called. Grant answered, and the man from the night before simply vanished. The group chat appeared in April of our second year. Grant's phone buzzed during dinner. 3 short vibrations in a row. I glanced over. He tilted the screen away, but not quickly enough. I caught the name of the chat before he could swipe it closed. Real Kesslers. For members. Judith, Grant, Paige, Cousin Rachel. No Myra. I said nothing that night. I waited until Grant fell asleep, then picked up his phone from the nightstand. The passcode was the same one he used for everything. His father's birthday. 0615. I read the messages. Paige had posted a photo of me from the previous Sunday's brunch at the country club. The caption, Marshall's clearance rack energy. 3 laughing emojis. One from Judith, one from Grant, one from Rachel. Judith had written 2 days earlier, Elena's recipes are ethnic. I do not know why she insists. Grant's response, a thumbs up and a laughing face. I scroll back 3 weeks. The tone was consistent throughout. Paige mocked my clothing. Judith mocked my background. Grant agreed with both of them, one emoji at a time. I screenshotted every message. 47 screenshots in total. I transferred them to my laptop and saved them inside the insurance folder. Then I placed Grant's phone back on the nightstand, aligned exactly as he had left it, and walked to the bathroom. I stood in front of the mirror. My hands were completely steady. My husband had been laughing at me with the people who were supposed to be my family. The laughing emoji was blue, Grant's favorite color. I returned to bed. I did not sleep, but I lay very still. Year 3 brought the gala. Every spring, Judith Kessler hosted the Mother's Day charity gala at Briarwood Country Club. Black tie, 600 guests, $200 per plate. The official beneficiary was the children's wing at Mercy General Hospital. Judith had chaired the event for 14 years. It was her kingdom, her name on the program, her photograph on the banner, her speech delivered from the stage. Every local politician, hospital board member, and business owner within a 40-mile radius received an invitation printed on her personal letterhead. This year, Paige served as event coordinator. Judith assigned me as a volunteer, greeting guests, printing name tags, organizing seating charts. The kind of work you assign someone you want visible but voiceless. I said yes to everything. Every envelope I stuffed, every spreadsheet I updated, every errand I completed brought me closer to the information I had been trained my entire career to find. On a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks before the gala, I was in Judith's home office retrieving a box of programs. A folder lay open on her desk. Financial records for the foundation. I glanced at the top page. Donations received, year to date, $340,000. Expenses filed, $295,000. Vendor payments to 4 companies for gala services. I did not take the folder. I did not photograph it. I simply read the numbers the way I read numbers every single day at work. That evening, I walked through the lobby of the country club. The lead donation board glowed against the far wall, cycling through donor names and contribution totals. The figure displayed, $280,000. $340,000 received. $280,000 displayed. A $60,000 gap. In my line of work, that gap has a name. I simply was not ready to say it aloud just yet. I drove to Akron on a Saturday morning. 2 hours on I-77. Elena's house was a small Cape Cod on a street lined with maple trees. Bookshelves covered every wall. Law journals she still subscribed to. A pot of coffee already waiting when I arrived. I sat at her kitchen table and told her everything. The Thanksgiving insult. The group chat. Grant's silence. Judith's financial records. The $60,000 discrepancy on the donation board. 3 years compressed into 40 minutes. Elena listened. She did not interrupt. She did not react. When I finished, she poured herself a second cup of coffee and set the mug down with care. Do you have documentation? A folder on my laptop. 3 years of screenshots, dates, financial observations, everything timestamped. She nodded slowly. What do you want, Myra? I had been rehearsing this answer for weeks, but when I finally said it aloud, it still felt enormous. I want to leave, but I want to leave standing up. Elena looked at me the way she used to when I brought home a math test I was proud of. Steady, serious, no wasted praise. Then you will. But not tonight. You need one more thing. What? You need them to show the world who they truly are in front of people who cannot unsee it. I drove back to Columbus with the windows cracked open. May air filled the car. The gala was 2 weeks away. I did not know what would unfold that night. I did not plan for Grant to strike me. I did not anticipate that 600 people would witness my marriage end in real time. But I knew one thing with certainty. Whatever Judith Kessler chose to do next, she would do it in a room full of witnesses who would never forget. 2 weeks out, Judith ran the gala preparation like a military campaign. The seating chart arrived in my inbox on a Wednesday. I opened the attachment and scrolled to my name. Table 47, back left corner of the ballroom, near the service entrance. Behind a pillar, Grant was seated at table 1, front and center. Judith to his right, Paige to his left. I called Grant. Why am I at table 47? He sighed. It is a family table, Myra. Mom wanted immediate family together for the toast. You understand? I understood perfectly. Paige called the following day with my assignment. You are on door duty, greeting guests as they arrive. You are so good with people, Myra. Her voice carried that particular sweetness that meant the precise opposite of what she was saying. I accepted every assignment without question. Door duty meant I would be standing at the entrance for the first 90 minutes of the event. It meant I would see every guest who walked through those doors. It meant I would be the very first face they remembered. On Thursday, I asked Paige for access to the donor database. I want to help with the thank you cards after the event, cross-referencing names with donation amounts, making sure no one gets overlooked. Paige approved it without a second thought. She emailed me the login credentials on Friday afternoon, 12 days before the gala. I opened the database that night at 11 p.m. at the kitchen table while Grant slept upstairs. Paige had handed me the password to the donor database the way you hand someone a set of decorative napkin rings. Something ornamental. Something harmless. She had no idea she had just handed me everything. The database was clean and well organized. Judas Foundation operated on a custom platform that tracked every donation, every pledge, and every vendor payment going back 6 years. I began with the current year. $340,000 in confirmed donations. That matched the paper records I had seen on Judith's desk. Then I pulled the vendor payments. For companies had been compensated for gala-related services, florals, catering, audiovisual, linen, and decor. The invoices totaled $212,000 across all 4 vendors. Standard pricing, standard terms, except 2 of the vendors did not exist. The first, Lakewood Event Florals, was registered to a P.O. box in Mentor, Ohio. No website, no phone number, no reviews, no social media presence. I searched the Ohio Secretary of State Business Registry. No active filing. The second, Heritage AV Solutions, listed an address on a commercial street in Parma. I looked it up on a mapping service. The address belonged to a shuttered dry cleaner. Payments to these 2 companies totaled $58,000 over the past 3 years, approximately $20,000 per year, divided across 4 invoices annually, each amount kept just below the threshold that would trigger an independent audit. I recognized the pattern immediately. In my profession, we call it shell disbursement. Small, consistent payments routed to entities that exist only on paper, carefully designed to appear routine until someone with the right training looks closely enough. I compiled everything into a formal report. Dates, amounts, vendor names, registered addresses, comparisons against verified expenses. I formatted it precisely the way I would format a compliance brief at work. Clean, annotated, sourced. I saved the report inside the insurance folder. I copied it onto an encrypted USB drive and mailed it to my mother's house in Akron. The numbers had spoken. I had listened. 1 week before the gala, Grant came home late, smelling of bourbon and someone else's cologne. He dropped his keys on the counter and opened the refrigerator like a man searching for something he had already lost. We need to talk about the seating, I said. He closed the refrigerator door. Not tonight. Your mother placed me at table 47, Grant. The farthest table from the stage, behind a pillar at her own event. He leaned back against the counter. It is one night, Myra. Can you just not make everything about you? It is not about me. It is about what it means. Your mother puts me at the back of the room, you sit beside her, and nobody says a word. What does that communicate to 600 people about our marriage? He rubbed his face. She is my mother. It is Mother's Day. I am your wife. It is every day. He did not answer. He stared at the floor for a long moment. Then he said something that made the entire kitchen go cold. Mom says you have been speaking about the family at work. That you have been sharing details about our finances with your colleagues. That was not true. I had never mentioned the Kesslers to a single person at my office. Not once. But Judith had planted the seed. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Textbook. That is not true, Grant. She would not say it if there was nothing behind it. I looked at my husband, the man who had called me at 2 a.m, voice broken open, crying about his father. The man who had said, Dad would have liked you. That man was buried somewhere beneath 21 years of his mother's voice, and I could no longer reach him. I slept in the guest room. I did not cry. I opened my laptop and added one more entry to the folder. 5 days before the gala, I was in the kitchen reaching for a glass on the top shelf when I heard Paige's voice drifting from the pantry. She was on speakerphone with Judith. The pantry door sat half open. Neither of them knew I was standing 10 feet away. "Mom, you should do a toast about real mothers. Mothers who actually raise their children in this country, with real values. Not like some people's mothers." They both laughed. The laugh was identical. Same pitch, same rhythm. Judith said, "I have already written it. The theme is what real family means. I have been working on it for 2 weeks. Paige lowered her voice. "Grant will love it. He always gets emotional about Dad on Mother's Day. You know how he gets." "Exactly. And if she reacts, which she will, then everyone in that room will see precisely what I have been telling them for 3 years. That she does not belong." I set the glass down on the counter without a sound. I stepped back into the hallway. My shoes did not touch the tile. They were not improvising. This was a coordinated plan. The toast was a choreographed performance designed to humiliate me in front of 600 witnesses. They wanted me to cry. They wanted me to make a scene. They wanted me to confirm their narrative. I would not give them that. I would attend. I would sit at table 47. I would listen to whatever Judith said into that microphone. And I would allow them to believe they had already won. Because they were planning a performance. They did not know I was planning an exit. The night before the gala, Judith hosted a family dinner. Grant, Paige, cousin Rachel, and me, seated around a table that had cost more than my first car. The conversation moved through its usual territory. Gala preparations, the guest list, the caterer's revised menu. Paige spoke for 10 minutes about the floral centerpieces without glancing at me once. Then Paige mentioned my mother. Casually, the way you mention the weather. "So Elena still lives in that little place in Akron. It must be lovely to have such simple tastes." Judith set down her wine glass. "Some people are simply built for smaller lives. Paige, do not be cruel." The words were correct. The tone was a blade. Paige smiled. She looked directly at me across the table and said it. "She is not one of us." The same 5 words Judith had used at Thanksgiving 2 years earlier. Word for word. The daughter had learned the mother's language fluently. Grant cut his steak. He did not look up. Rachel shifted in her chair and studied her napkin. She was not a villain. She was the kind of person who understands exactly what is happening and chooses to do absolutely nothing about it. The world is full of Rachels. I excused myself. In the bathroom, I pressed my back against the door and drew the silk handkerchief from my jacket pocket. I held it between both hands. Elena's name in pale blue thread. The fabric was smooth and cool against my palms. I did not cry. I texted my mother. "Tomorrow I will be ready." Elena responded within 12 seconds. One word. Good. That night, sleep would not come. The house was dark. Grant was in the master bedroom. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. At 1:15 in the morning, I got up to find my phone charger. I thought I had left it in the home office. I walked down the hallway barefoot, opened the office door, and turned on the desk lamp. My charger was plugged into the outlet behind Grant's desk. I crouched down to reach it. My hand brushed against the bottom drawer. It was slightly ajar. Inside, beneath a stack of old tax returns, lay a yellowed envelope, handwritten. The ink had faded but remained fully legible. "For Grant, to be opened when you marry." Harold Kessler's handwriting. Grant's father, the man who had been gone for 21 years. I should not have opened it, but I was sitting on the floor of a house that carried my husband's name on the deed and his mother's name on the mortgage, and my lip was already tender from where his temper would land in less than 24 hours. I opened it. The letter was 2 pages. Harold had written it 6 months before his heart attack. He wrote about Judith, about her strength and her fear, about the way she controlled the things she loved most because she was terrified of losing them. And then this. "Your mother is a strong woman, but strength is not the same as kindness. If your wife ever tells you she is hurting, believe her. Do not make the mistake I made." Harold Kessler had seen his wife with perfect clarity. He simply had not possessed the courage to act on what he saw. 21 years later, his son was making the identical choice. I photographed both pages. I returned the letter precisely as I had found it. I unplugged my charger and walked back to the guest room. I did not sleep, but I now carried something I had not possessed before. Gala night. The Briarwood Country Club ballroom had been transformed completely. Crystal chandeliers dimmed to a warm amber glow. White tablecloths stretched across 60 round tables. A stage at the far end with a mahogany podium, 2 wireless microphones, and a projection screen cycling through photographs of the children's hospital wing. Judith arrived at 5:45 in an emerald gown and diamond earrings. She moved through the room like a woman who owned the building. She did not own it, but she had donated enough to it over the years that the distinction had long since ceased to matter. I arrived at 6, a simple navy dress, flats instead of heels, because I would be standing at the entrance for 2 hours. Paige met me at the door with a name tag. First name only. No Kessler. We ran out of the formal ones, she said. I clipped the tag to my dress. I took my position at the entrance. For 90 minutes, I greeted every guest who walked through those doors. The mayor, the hospital board chair, 2 state senators, a retired teacher named Deborah Aldridge, who shook my hand warmly and said, "You must be Grant's wife. He is a lucky man." I smiled and said, "Thank you." Inside the ballroom, Grant was at table 1. His second glass of champagne was already half empty. He had not come to greet me. He had not sent a single text. During a lull in arrivals, I walked past the lobby. The LED donation board cycled through donor names and running totals. The displayed figure, $280,000. I knew the real number, $340,000. I photographed the board with my phone. Timestamped. Geotagged. I sent it to Elena with no accompanying message. She would know exactly what it meant. On stage, Judith tested the microphone. 2 sharp taps. Testing. Perfect. 600 people were about to witness me confirm something about my husband I had quietly suspected for 3 years. Dinner was served at 7:30. I sat at table 47 among strangers. The strangers were kind. A dentist named Paul and his wife. A retired schoolteacher, Mrs. Aldridge, who had moved from the greeting line to the table beside mine. A florist named Diane who had designed the centerpieces and was eating quickly because she still had arrangements to break down afterward. They asked me about myself, what I did for work, how long Grant and I had been married. I answered. They listened. Nobody mentioned that I was the only spouse in the room sitting 300 feet from her husband. At 8:15, Judith took the stage. She held the microphone like she had been born holding one. The spotlight caught her earrings. The room fell quiet. Good evening, everyone. Happy Mother's Day. Applause. Warm. Genuine. This night is about the women who sacrifice everything for their families. The women who stay up late, who drive a carpool, who work 2 jobs, who hold a family together when no one else will. More applause. But not everyone understands sacrifice. The room shifted. A few guests exchanged glances. Some women marry into families they do not appreciate. They bring foreign customs and expect the rest of us to adapt. The temperature dropped. I could feel it from table 47. Nervous laughter rippled from the front tables. A sharp intake of breath from somewhere near the bar. Judith looked directly at me. Across 60 tables, past 600 faces, her eyes found mine and held them. I raised my son to value tradition, loyalty, and family. I pray every day that he remembers where he comes from. Grant, at table 1, was nodding. Not embarrassed. Not uncomfortable. Nodding. If you have ever sat at a table where someone transformed a speech into a weapon, you know precisely what this moment feels like. That champagne glass she is holding might as well be a gavel. Hit subscribe if you want to see what happens when the real judge walks in. Judith was not finished. She had the room and she knew it. The nervous laughter from the front tables had given her permission to keep going. She leaned closer to the microphone. A real mother raises her children in this country, in this community, with values we can all understand. She paused. She looked at me again. Then she said it. Not in a studio apartment in Akron, working as a translator. She was talking about my mother. On Mother's Day, in a speech about mothers, the dentist's wife at my table brought her hand to her mouth. Mrs. Aldridge reached over and laid her palm flat against my arm. Are you all right, honey? I was completely still. My hands rested in my lap. My breathing was steady and even. I could feel the silk handkerchief in my jacket pocket, pressed against my ribs. Judith finished with a toast. To real mothers. To real family. She raised her glass. The room drank, some eagerly, some with the hollow expression of people who wish they were anywhere else. I stood up. 600 pairs of eyes moved to table 47. The woman in the navy dress with the first name only name tag. I walked toward the stage. My footsteps on the ballroom floor were the only sound in the room. 47 tables. 300 feet. I stopped directly in front of the podium. Judith remained on stage, glass in hand. I did not step up to join her. I stood below and spoke clearly. Judith. My mother worked 3 jobs to put herself through law school. She did not require a trust fund or a charity gala to prove she was a good mother. She simply needed to show up every single day. And she did. My voice did not break. Judith's face dissolved into performance. She pressed her hand to her chest. Her eyes filled with tears. Quick, practiced, perfectly timed. She turned to face the audience. Do you see? Do you see what she does to me? She attacks me on Mother's Day at my own event. Grant rose from table 1, for champagne's deep. His face was flushed. He moved between the tables like a man on a fixed track, aimed directly at me. Apologized to my mother. Now. I looked at him. My husband. The man who had wept about his father at 2 in the morning. The man who had responded to group chat mockery about me with a thumbs-up emoji. No. Grant's right hand came across the left side of my face. Open palm. Full contact. The microphone on the podium was still live. The sound of the slap, skin on skin, sharp and flat, passed through all 12 speakers, ceiling-mounted, tuned for a room of 600. 3 seconds of absolute silence followed. Then Judith smiled. Small. Satisfied. Paige, standing near the bar, covered her mouth, but her eyes were laughing. A few guests at the front tables laughed nervously, the way people laugh when they have no idea what else to do. My lip was split. I tasted copper. My left cheek burned with a heat that seemed to radiate from inside my skull. The retired teacher, Mrs. Aldridge, rose from her table. Oh my God! She was the only person among 600 who moved. I reached into my jacket pocket. I withdrew the silk handkerchief. White linen. Elena's name in pale blue, thread along the corner. I pressed it to my lip. The blood was vivid against the white fabric. I wiped my mouth. I folded the handkerchief. I returned it to my pocket. 3 of the 600 guests had their phones raised. One of them was the county clerk's wife. I did not scream. I looked at Grant. I looked at Judith. I looked at the 600 faces staring back at me from their $200 seats. Not one person had stepped between us. Not one person had said stop. 600 adults in evening wear, and a retired schoolteacher was the only one who moved. I turned. I walked toward the exit. Back straight. Shoulders level. My flats barely registered on the marble floor, but in that silence, every step echoed behind me. Paige's voice carried across the ballroom. Drama queen. Cannot even take a joke. Grant called after me. Myra. Myra, come back. You are overreacting. From the stage, Judith's voice, still amplified through the microphone she had not released. Let her go. She will come crawling back. They always do. They always do. I pushed through the double doors. The May night met my face like cold water. The parking lot was half full. Crickets in the hedgerow. A catering van near the service entrance with its hazard lights blinking orange in the dark. I stood there for 30 seconds. My lip was bleeding. The bruise on my cheek had already begun to swell. The silk handkerchief in my pocket was damp with my blood. I took out my phone. The screen lit up. 9:17 p.m. Saturday, May 10th. I opened my contacts and scrolled to the letter E. I had made thousands of phone calls in my life. Business calls, scheduling calls, calls to insurance companies, banks, client offices, hospital administrators, calls that meant nothing, and calls that meant everything. This was the only call that had ever truly mattered. I pressed the green button. 2 rings. Myra. Mom. Please come. Elena did not ask what had happened. She heard it in the way I said please. In 33 years, I had never spoken that word to her in that particular tone. Where are you? Briarwood Country Club. Ballroom B. I am in the parking lot. Are you hurt? He hit me. A pause. 3 seconds. I could hear Elena breathing. Then her voice went flat. Not angry. Flat. The voice she used when she was reaching a decision. Not experiencing a feeling. Making a plan. I will be there in 40 minutes. Do not wash your face. Do not change your clothes. Sit in your car and lock the doors. Do you understand me? Yes. Good. I love you. I am coming. I walked to my car. A silver Honda Civic parked in the second row, near a lamppost. I unlocked it, sat in the driver's seat, and locked the doors behind me. I did not turn on the radio. I did not call anyone else. I sat in the dark with blood drying on my chin and the silk handkerchief folded in my pocket, and 40 minutes of silence stretched out ahead of me. My mother had given me those exact instructions once before. I was 19. My college roommate's boyfriend had shoved her into a wall during an argument. I called Elena, panicked, uncertain what to do. Elena had said the same words then. Do not wash. Do not change. That is evidence. I had helped my roommate file a report that same night. I never once imagined I would need those words for myself. The dashboard clock read 9:19. Elena would arrive by 9:59. I counted the minutes in the dark. Inside the ballroom, the evening continued. I learned what happened next from Mrs. Aldridge, who stayed until the very end. She told me everything the following week, seated in her living room with a cup of chamomile tea, speaking slowly and carefully because she wanted to get every single detail right. After I left, Judith returned to the microphone. She adjusted her earrings, cleared her throat, and said, Well, now that the drama is behind us, let us get back to celebrating real mothers. The applause was thinner this time, scattered. Several guests did not clap at all. Grant walked back to table 1. Paige met him halfway with a glass of water. She touched his arm and said, You did the right thing. He sat down and poured himself another drink. Mrs. Aldridge watched from table 47. She counted the guests who slipped out quietly. The county clerk's wife and her husband, gone without a goodbye. 2 hospital board members, who shook hands with no one on their way to the exit. A local attorney named Gerald Pace and his wife, who stopped at the coat check, left a $20 bill with the attendant, and walked out without collecting their coats. 7 people left the gala in the 12 minutes following my departure. Mrs. Aldridge walked to table 1. She stood directly in front of Grant, who was staring into his glass. Young man, I have been a teacher for 35 years. I have watched boys become men and men become boys. What you just did was a boy. Grant looked up. His eyes were red. Mind your own business. Mrs. Aldridge nodded once. She picked up her clutch. She walked to the lobby and sat down on a bench near the coat check. She made 2 phone calls. I would not learn about either of them until much later, but both of them mattered. 40 minutes later, a dark blue sedan pulled into the parking lot and stopped 3 spaces from my car. Elena Novak stepped out, gray hair drawn back in a low knot. No makeup, a black coat worn over a house dress. She had come straight from home. Flat shoes, reading glasses still resting on top of her head. She walked to my car and tapped on the window twice. Firm, not urgent. I unlocked the door. She opened it and crouched down to my level. She looked at my face. The bruise was already forming beneath my left eye. The blood on my lip had dried in a thin line along my chin. Elena cupped my face in both hands. She did not speak for 10 seconds. Her thumbs rested just below my cheekbones. Her fingers were cool against my skin. Then she said, Okay, here is what we do. She spoke the way she had spoken to 1,000 people across 1,000 courtrooms. Calm, precise, methodical. First, I am going to photograph your injuries. My phone has a timestamp. Second, we go back inside, not to confront anyone, but to obtain your husband's full legal name, the event address, and the names of at least 3 witnesses. Third, we drive to the police station. You file a report tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. I do not want to go back in there. You will not be alone this time. She extended her hand. I took it. She pulled me to my feet. My legs were steady. My breathing was steady. My mother was standing beside me in a house dress and flat shoes, and she was the most powerful person in that entire parking lot. We walked toward the entrance together. She held my arm, not supporting me, walking with me. The double doors opened into the lobby. The donation board was still glowing. $280,000 in blue LED light against the wall. We moved through the lobby and into the ballroom. The band was playing a Frank Sinatra song. Couples were dancing. Champagne flutes caught the light from the chandeliers above. The room looked as though absolutely nothing had happened. Then, table by table, the conversations fell away. Judith saw me first. Her face hardened immediately. Then she saw Elena, a woman she had met exactly twice, at the wedding and at one Christmas dinner. Both times Judith had referred to her as the translator from Akron. Judith rose from table 1. She smoothed the front of her gown. She crossed the floor in 4 deliberate strides. Myra, if you have returned to apologize, you may do so privately. You have embarrassed yourself quite enough for one evening. Elena spoke. Not loudly, not forcefully, just clearly. The way a sentence sounds when every single word has been carefully weighed before it is released. Mrs. Kessler, my name is Elena Novak. I am here because your son struck my daughter in this room, in front of these people, 40 minutes ago. The band stopped playing. The singer looked toward the event coordinator, Paige, who was standing near the stage with her clipboard frozen mid-gesture. Judith stiffened. That is a family matter. You have no business here. Elena did not blink. Battery is not a family matter, Mrs. Kessler. It is a criminal matter. She paused. The entire room was listening. Every table, every face. And I would know. I spent 18 years hearing cases exactly like this one. The silence that followed was different from the silence after the slap. That silence had been shock. This one was understanding. If someone you love needs to hear that sentence, battery is not a family matter, please share this video with them. Now let me tell you what happened next. Grant stood up. He knocked his champagne glass sideways. The wine spread slowly across the white tablecloth in a wide amber stain. Myra, let us talk about this at home. Please. Elena turned to him. She will not be going home with you tonight. Judith shifted tactics immediately. The tears returned faster this time, louder and more practiced. She grabbed Grant's arm. Do you see what they are doing? They are attacking our family on Mother's Day. Your father would be ashamed of all of this. I spoke. I had been silent since Elena arrived. My own voice surprised me with how level it sounded. Harold's letter says differently. Judith's face went white. Not red. White. The color drained from her cheeks, as though someone had opened a valve. What letter? The one in Grant's desk. The one Harold wrote before he died, about how his greatest regret was not standing up to you. 600 people heard that sentence. I had not raised my voice. I did not need to. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice shifting in a water glass 3 tables away. Judith's hands fell from Grant's arm. That letter is private property. You had absolutely no right to read it. Elena stepped forward. 1 step. We are not here about the letter, Mrs. Kessler. We are here because your son committed assault in front of 600 witnesses. We will be filing a police report tonight. Everything else is a conversation for attorneys. Her voice was so composed it made Judith sound as though she were thrashing underwater. Grant looked at his mother. He looked at me. He looked at Elena. His mouth opened and produced nothing. He resembled a man who had been standing on ground he believed was solid and had just felt it give way beneath him. The wine stain on the tablecloth was still spreading. Paige moved first. She crossed the room from the stage, clipboard still in hand, and positioned herself alongside Judith. Damage control. This is completely ridiculous, Paige said. Her voice pulled tight. Grant barely touched her. She is making a scene for attention. Same as always. Elena looked at Paige, measured her steadily. Are you a witness to what occurred here tonight? Paige did not hesitate. Yes, and it was nothing. Elena nodded once. Good. Your statement will be noted. Paige's expression shifted. The realization moved across her face like a change in weather. She had just confirmed, in front of 600 people, that she had personally witnessed Grant strike me and found it entirely acceptable. Grant leaned toward Judith and whispered just loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. Mom, should I call the lawyer? Judith seized his wrist. Do not say another word, Grant. Not one word. I spoke again. My voice remained steady. Judith, you should also know that I have been reviewing the gala's financial records. The donor database reflects $340,000 received this year. The board in your lobby, the one every single guest walked past tonight, shows $280,000. I paused. Let the numbers do what numbers do. I have documented the discrepancy, along with vendor payments to 2 companies that do not appear to exist. Through the open ballroom doors, the lobby was clearly visible. The LED donation board continued its slow cycle. $280,000 glowing steadily in blue light against the wall. Judith looked at the board. Then she looked at me. You went through my records. I was a volunteer, Judith. Paige gave me the database password. Paige's clipboard hit the floor. Judith broke. Not the way people break in films. No single dramatic turning point. No cinematic collapse. She broke the way a person breaks when every wall they have constructed over 21 years begins cracking simultaneously from all sides. She spun toward the room. Her hands were trembling. Her voice climbed 3 octaves. She is lying. She is a vindictive, ungrateful little immigrant's daughter who wormed her way into this family and is now destroying everything I have built. Mom, stop. Grant's voice was louder than I had ever heard it, but Judith could not stop. 21 years of carefully maintained control was dissolving in real time. She pointed directly at Elena. You raised a snake. Your daughter is destroying everything I built. Everything Harold left behind. Everything. Elena did not move. Her hands remained at her sides. Her expression did not waver. Your son hit my daughter in this room, in front of these people. That is what happened tonight. Everything else is a conversation for lawyers. Her voice was so utterly calm it made Judith sound as though she were drowning. A man at table 3 rose to his feet, mid-50s, gray sport coat. He spoke with the particular authority that requires no volume to carry weight. Ma'am, he was looking directly at me. Would you like me to call this in? I am off duty, but I can have a unit here within 10 minutes. I looked at him. Yes, please. The microphone on the podium was still live. Judith's outburst. Every word, every accusation, every desperate and unraveling syllable had been broadcasting through the speaker system the entire time. The sound technician in the back booth had not known what to do. So he had done nothing. The room had absorbed everything at full concert volume. Judith was still screaming. Elena was perfectly still. I was standing beside my mother with dried blood on my chin, and I was the calmest I had ever been in my entire life. Officer Dan Morales arrived in 12 minutes. Khaki uniform, body camera, radio clipped to his shoulder. The off-duty officer, Sergeant Hale, met Morales at the entrance and briefed him quietly. Mrs. Aldridge was seated in the lobby. She rose the moment the officers walked in and said, "I saw everything. I will give a full statement." Morales entered the ballroom. 600 guests watched him walk to the center of the room. He was professional. No urgency, no theater. He approached me first. "Ma'am, I am Officer Morales. Are you the complainant?" "Yes." He photographed my face. The bruise forming beneath my left eye. The split lip. He noted the time. 9:47 p.m. Then he turned toward Grant. Grant was standing near table 1. Judith had her hand firmly on his arm. Paige was positioned 2 steps behind them both. Officer Morales spoke evenly. "Sir, did you strike this woman?" Grant looked at his mother. Judith's eyes were wide and urgent, willing him to say something. Deny it. Explain it. Reframe it. But the microphone had carried the sound of the slap to every corner of the room. 3 guests had video footage on their phones. Mrs. Aldridge was standing 6 feet away with her arms folded across her chest. Grant looked at me. His face was the face of a man who had simply run out of room. "Yes, sir. You are being placed under arrest for domestic battery. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." Grant turned. The handcuffs clicked. The sound was small. Nothing at all like the slap. But in that ballroom, with 600 people watching in absolute silence, it was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I watched my husband being walked toward the exit, past table 1, past the stage, past the podium where his mother had stood 30 minutes earlier, raising a glass to real family. I said it quietly, not to Judith, not to the room, to myself, though loud enough to carry. "You were right, Judith. I was never one of you. Thank God for that." Judith was watching Grant, and for one brief moment, 3 seconds, perhaps less, something crossed her face that I had never seen there before. Not anger, not calculation, fear. The raw, genuine terror of a 63-year-old woman watching the only person she had left being led away from her. It lasted 3 seconds. Then it was gone. "This is your fault, Myra. You planned all of this. You came here to destroy us." Elena stepped close to Judith, not threateningly, just close enough to be heard by Judith and no one else. "You do not strike someone and then call it love." Judith reached for the podium microphone. Pure instinct. The reflex of a woman who had controlled every room she entered by holding that device. Her hand caught the mic stand. It tipped. The microphone struck the floor. A feedback screech tore through the ballroom like a blade through glass. Nobody picked it up. Elena took my arm. We walked out together, past the LED donation board, still cycling its figures in the lobby. $280,000. Past the guests standing in quiet clusters, whispering. Past the coat check, where Gerald Pace's coats still hung unclaimed. Out into the May night. The police station was 14 minutes from Briarwood Country Club. Elena drove. I sat in the passenger seat. Neither of us spoke until she pulled into the parking space and turned off the engine. Inside, the fluorescent lights were the greenish-white kind that make everyone look exhausted. Officer Morales had arrived ahead of us. He sat at a desk near the window with a computer, a stack of forms, and a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. I filed the report. Full name, address, date of incident, location, description of events, witnesses. He typed while I spoke. His expression remained neutral and professional throughout. Is there anyone else you would like us to contact? No. Elena sat in the plastic chair beside me. She offered no legal counsel. She had told me in the car that she could not act as my attorney because she was the victim's mother and a retired judge. But she could sit there. And she did. When the report was complete, I signed the bottom of the page. The pen was a cheap ballpoint. The ink was blue. Elena reached into my jacket pocket. She withdrew the silk handkerchief. The blood had dried into the white fabric in a thin brown line. She held it quietly for a moment, then folded it with care. Once, twice, 3 times. She placed it back in my pocket. You will not need this anymore. I looked at her. Did you know, when you gave me this handkerchief on my wedding day, did you know it would come to this? I hoped it would not, but I raised you to be ready if it did. I called a divorce attorney the following morning. Her name was Janet Petrusky, and she had been expecting my call. I had first consulted her 14 months earlier. The weeks after the gala moved quickly. Grant was charged with domestic battery, a first-degree misdemeanor in Ohio. 600 witnesses. 3 phone recordings. Mrs. Aldridge's detailed written statement. The county clerk's wife had captured 11 seconds of video that included the sound of a slap carrying through the speakers. Grant's attorney advised a plea agreement. He accepted. Community service, mandatory anger management classes, a temporary restraining order. The divorce moved faster than I had anticipated. Janet Petrusky filed within 72 hours of the gala. My documentation was thorough. 3 years of financial records, the insurance folder, the separate savings account, the maximized retirement fund. Grant's criminal charge significantly weakened his negotiating position. Judith's name on the mortgage made the house legally complicated. But I did not want the house. I kept my savings. I kept my career. I kept my name. I did not request a single dollar from Harold Kessler's trust fund. I did not want their money. I wanted my life returned to me. The foundation audit came from a separate direction entirely. I submitted my compliance report, the vendor analysis, the $60,000 discrepancy, the shell companies, to the state attorney general's office. It was not an act of revenge. It was my professional obligation. When you identify financial irregularities within a charitable organization, you report them. That is simply the job. The Attorney General opened a formal investigation. Judith was not criminally charged, but the foundation was placed under independent oversight. The annual gala was suspended pending full review. Judith was asked to step down as chair. Paige lost her event coordinator position when the foundation restructured. She found a role at a smaller event planning firm in Medina. She was not destroyed. She was simply, for the first time in her adult life, standing on ground that did not have her mother's name on the deed. The donation board came down the week after the audit was announced. $280,000 in blue LED light, dark. 3 months later, I moved back to Akron. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with a window that looked out onto a maple tree. It was not unlike the apartment I had grown up in, except this one was entirely mine. My name on the lease, my dishes in the cabinets, my books on the shelves. I began a new position as compliance director at a regional healthcare nonprofit. It was a role I had been working toward for 3 years through the networking, the professional contacts, the reputation I had built entirely on my own terms. On Sundays, I drove to Elena's house for dinner. She made sarmal, the same recipe Judith had dismissed at that first Thanksgiving. We ate at the kitchen table surrounded by law journals and the quiet sound of coffee percolating, and no one in that room decided who belonged and who did not. Elena asked me one Sunday, "How do you feel?" Like I can finally breathe. A card arrived in the mail that week. A small envelope, handwritten. The return address was a street in Westlake. Mrs. Deborah Aldridge, the retired schoolteacher. Dear Myra, proud of you, dear. Some lessons take real courage to teach. I pinned it to my refrigerator. It is still there. I used to believe that staying was strength. I thought endurance was the same thing as dignity, that absorbing someone else's cruelty long enough would eventually prove something about my worth, my patience, my love. It does not. Dignity is knowing when to stand your ground and knowing when to walk through the door. My mother taught me both. That is my story. 3 years of silence. 600 witnesses. One phone call that changed everything. Mom, please come. If this story reminded you that you deserve more from a partner, from a family, from yourself, let that be your sign. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.